Have you ever lost something irreplaceable? For one stubborn 78-year-old widower, spotting his missing dog after 5 years wasn't just coincidence. It was destiny. This isn't a simple lost and found tale, but a story of criminal conspiracy, unwavering loyalty, and an unlikely partnership that changed countless lives. Subscribe now and comment where you're watching from as we reveal how one distinctive star-shaped marking on a German Shepherd's chest exposed a 5-state crime ring and reunited hundreds of families with their stolen pets. The morning sun cast long shadows across the farmer's market in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, a place where the perfume of fresh peaches mingled with the earthy scent of homegrown tomatoes. Walter Abernathy, a weathered 78-year-old with knuckles gnarled from decades of farming, walked slowly between the stalls, nodding hello to familiar faces. His faded blue eyes, still sharp beneath bushy white eyebrows, scanned the crowd out of habit, though he rarely expected to see anyone new in this sleepy town of 3,000 souls. "Morning, Walt," called Mabel from her jam stand. "How's that knee treating you today?" "Same as always," Walter replied, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Tells me when rain's coming better than any weatherman." He adjusted his worn leather belt and continued his Sunday ritual, canvas bag swinging lightly against his hip. 5 years into widowhood, these small interactions were what kept him tethered to the world. Since Martha's passing and then Buddy's disappearance, Walter's life had contracted to the boundaries of his small farm and these weekend outings. Then he saw it, a flash of familiar movement across the market. Walter froze, his heart thundering against his ribs. "Can't be," he whispered. A German Shepherd strained at its leash beside a pottery stand, its coat the rich black and tan Walter knew by heart. But it was the distinctive white star-shaped patch on its chest that made his weathered hands begin to tremble. "Buddy." The name escaped his lips like a prayer. As if hearing a voice from another life, the dog's head snapped toward Walter. For one eternal moment, dog and man locked eyes across the crowded market. Then the German Shepherd erupted in frantic barking, pulling desperately toward Walter with such force that the young man holding the leash nearly lost his balance. "Whoa, Duke, calm down." The bearded artisan in his 30s struggled to control the dog. "What's gotten into you?" "He's never done this before," he explained apologetically to onlookers. Walter couldn't move. His legs felt rooted to the ground as memories cascaded through him. Martha laughing as puppy Buddy chased butterflies, the dog sleeping beside Walter's bed every night after the funeral, the emptiness of the farmhouse when Buddy vanished without a trace. "Sir, are you okay?" A concerned vendor touched Walter's arm, noticing his pallor. Walter's voice cracked as he replied, "That's my dog." "Pardon." The vendor followed his gaze. "That's Buddy, my dog who disappeared 5 years ago." Walter's gnarled hands clenched around his walking stick. "I'd know that star anywhere. Martha always said it meant he had a piece of heaven in him." Across the market, the young owner was finally calming the dog, though the animal's eyes never left Walter. "That's Jim Pearson's dog," the vendor said gently. "He's had him a couple years now. Brings him every Sunday." Walter squared his shoulders, a spark igniting in his chest, determination mixed with a wild, desperate hope. "Maybe so," he said, his voice gaining strength. "But before that, he was mine, and I aim to prove it." As Walter took his first step toward the pottery stand, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, purpose flowing back into his veins. If there was even the slightest chance this was Buddy, his last living connection to Martha and the life they'd built together, Walter Abernathy would move heaven and earth to bring him home. Jim Pearson wiped clay from his hands as the German Shepherd finally settled at his feet, though the dog's amber eyes remained fixed on the elderly man now approaching their booth. Jim had never seen Duke so agitated. 3 pottery mugs had toppled during the dog's outburst, fortunately landing on the grass without breaking. "Beautiful animal you've got there," Walter said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. The slightly crooked ear that never stood quite right, the way the dog's head tilted quizzically to one side. "Thanks," Jim replied, reaching down to scratch behind the dog's ears. "Duke's been my shadow for about 2 years now. Best company a man could ask for." Walter knelt slowly, his knees protesting, and extended a weathered hand. "May I?" Jim nodded, curious about this stranger who'd sparked such a reaction in his normally well-behaved companion. "Hey there, old friend," Walter murmured, his fingers trembling as they touched the dog's fur. The German Shepherd whined softly, sniffing Walter's hand before pressing his muzzle against the elderly man's palm with unexpected gentleness. "Well, I'll be damned," Jim whispered. "He's usually wary with strangers." Walter's eyes glistened as he ran his fingers over the dog's head, finding a small scar above the right eye, exactly where Buddy had been nicked by a fence wire as a puppy. "My name's Walter Abernathy," he said finally, straightening with effort. "And I believe your dog once belonged to me and my late wife." Jim's expression shifted from curiosity to wariness. "Look, sir, I understand dogs can look similar, but Duke's been with me for 2 years, you said." Walter nodded. "My buddy disappeared 5 years ago. Had a white star right here," he gestured to the dog's chest, "and a small scar above his right eye. Microchipped too, though we never got a call." The dog whined again, looking between the two men with apparent confusion. "Mr. Abernathy," Jim started carefully, "I bought Duke fair and square from a farmer outside Johnson City. He's got papers and everything." "I'm not saying you didn't," Walter replied, dignity in every line of his weathered face. "But I am saying this dog was stolen from me, not lost. And I'd like the chance to prove it." A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the earlier commotion and now the tense conversation. Among them was Elaine Winters, who'd lived next door to Walter before moving to the other side of Oak Ridge 3 years earlier. "Walter? Is that you?" She pushed through to the front, her eyes widening at the sight of the dog. "Good heavens, is that Buddy?" Walter turned, relief washing over his features at the sight of a friendly face. "Elaine, you remember Buddy, don't you?" "Of course I do. That star marking is unmistakable." She looked apologetically at Jim. "I was Walter's neighbor when Buddy disappeared. Always thought it was strange how he vanished from a fenced yard." Jim shifted uncomfortably, glancing down at the dog who was now sitting alert, eyes darting between Walter and Elaine as if following their conversation. "Mr. Pearson," Walter said, pulling a worn leather wallet from his back pocket and extracting a faded photograph. "This is Buddy with my Martha, God rest her soul, taken about 6 years ago on our back porch." Jim reluctantly accepted the photo, his frown deepening as he saw the identical white star pattern on the chest of the dog in the picture. "This doesn't prove anything," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "No, it doesn't," Walter agreed. "But a DNA test might. Or if the microchip data can be recovered. I can't just give you my dog based on a hunch and an old photo," Jim protested, though more gently now. Walter's eyes held no anger, only resolve. "I'm not asking you to. I'm asking for a chance to find the truth. For both our sakes." He hesitated, then added softly, "He's all I have left of her." The market had grown quiet around them, the usual Sunday chatter replaced by the tension of the unfolding drama. The German Shepherd, sensing the importance of the moment, stood and pressed against Walter's leg exactly as Buddy used to do when sensing his master's distress. Jim's eyes widened at the gesture. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. "I'll be back here next Sunday," Walter said, straightening to his full height. "If you're willing, we can talk more then." As Walter turned to leave, the dog let out a mournful whine that echoed across the suddenly silent market. The farmhouse sat on 12 acres of land that had been in Walter's family for generations. Once bustling with life, Martha's flower gardens, their son David's laughter before he moved to Chicago, Buddy's playful barking. It now stood as quiet as a museum. Walter sat on his creaking porch swing, staring at the photograph of Martha and Buddy he'd shown Jim Pearson that morning. "What do you think, Martha?" he whispered to the smiling woman in the image. "Am I chasing ghosts, or was that really our boy?" The ceiling fan spun lazily overhead as the phone rang inside. Walter hoisted himself up with a groan and shuffled through the screen door. "Hello, Grandpa? It's Lily. Mom said you called 3 times today. Everything okay?" Walter's heart warmed at his granddaughter's voice. At 26, Lily was the only family member who visited regularly, driving down from Nashville every month or so. "I think I found Buddy," he said without preamble. A pause. "Grandpa, Buddy's been gone for 5 years." "I know how long it's been," Walter replied, his voice firming. "Saw him plain as day at the farmer's market. Got that same star on his chest, same crooked ear. Recognized me too, nearly pulled his leash right out of his new owner's hands." The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. "You think I'm confused," Walter stated flatly. "Just like your father thought I was confused when I said someone took Buddy instead of him just running off." "I didn't say that," Lily protested. "It's just 5 years is a long time, and you've been through so much since Grandma died." Walter lowered himself onto the kitchen stool, feeling every one of his 78 years. "Lily, I know what I saw. This isn't grief talking. I need your help." "What kind of help?" Her tone remained skeptical but softened around the edges. "Research. You're good with that computer of yours. I need to find out about dog theft in the area from 5 years back. And I need to know my rights if I can prove Buddy's mine." By Wednesday, Walter had established a routine. Each morning, he drove his old Ford pickup into town, parking across from Jim Pearson's craft shop where the young man sold his pottery. From the diner window opposite, Walter would drink coffee and watch as Jim arrived, the German shepherd always trotting faithfully at his side. "More coffee, Walt?" Doreen, the waitress who'd known him for 30 years, refilled his cup without waiting for an answer. "Still watching that dog, huh?" Walter nodded, not taking his eyes from the storefront across the street. "You know, half the town's talking about Sunday," she continued, resting one hand on her hip. "Elaine Winters came in yesterday, saying she always thought there was something fishy about Buddy disappearing like he did." "Did she now?" Walter took a sip of the steaming coffee. "Said she remembered seeing a white van parked down your road the day before it happened. Never thought much of it until now." Walter's hand stilled. "She never mentioned a van to me." "Well, memory's a funny thing," Doreen said. "Sometimes you need something to jog it loose." On Thursday, Walter gathered his courage and crossed the street to Jim's shop. A bell tinkled as he pushed open the door. The German shepherd, dozing on a bed behind the counter, lifted his head instantly. His tail began to thump against the floor as he recognized Walter. Jim emerged from the back room, clay-smudged and wary. "Mr. Abernathy." "Call me Walter," he replied, then nodded toward the dog. "How's he been?" "Fine," Jim answered curtly, then sighed. "Look, I've been thinking about Sunday. I bought Duke fair and square, but the man I got him from, Hank Miller, said he'd only had him a short while himself. Got him from a trucker passing through who couldn't keep him." Hope flared in Walter's chest. "That fits. If someone stole him, they'd likely pass him along quick." Jim hesitated, then said, "I love this dog, Mr. Aber, Walter. He's been my companion through some rough patches." "I understand that better than most," Walter replied softly. "I'm not here to threaten you or cause trouble. But if this is Buddy, I've spent 5 years wondering if he was cold or hungry or being treated right." The dog whined, sensing the tension. "Would you let me spend some time with him?" Walter asked. "Might settle things one way or another." Jim looked between the elderly man and the dog, whose eyes hadn't left Walter since he entered. "Saturday," Jim finally said. "Come by my place. We'll see how Duke really responds to you when there's no crowd watching." Walter extended his hand, which Jim reluctantly shook. "Thank you," Walter said. "That's all I'm asking for, a chance at the truth." Jim Pearson's cabin sat on the edge of Willow Creek, a modest dwelling with a sprawling pottery studio attached to the side. Walter parked his truck beneath an ancient oak tree and sat for a moment, steadying his nerves. This meeting would either confirm his hopes or crush them entirely. The front door opened before Walter reached it. Jim stood framed in the doorway, his expression guarded but not unfriendly. "He's been acting strange all morning," Jim said by way of greeting. "Sitting by the window, whining. Almost like he knew you were coming." Walter nodded, removing his worn canvas hat. "Buddy always could sense things before they happened. Martha used to say he knew when storms were brewing before the weatherman did." Inside, the cabin smelled of clay and freshly brewed coffee. The German shepherd wasn't immediately visible, making Walter's heart sink momentarily. Then came the click of nails on hardwood as the dog trotted in from another room. What happened next left both men speechless. The German shepherd stopped, stared at Walter for one frozen second, then raced toward him with a high-pitched whine unlike anything Jim had ever heard from the animal. The dog leapt up, front paws landing gently on Walter's chest, and began frantically licking the old man's face. "Down, boy," Walter laughed, tears welling in his eyes as he stroked the dog's fur. "Down, buddy." The dog immediately dropped to all fours, then pressed against Walter's legs, circling him with his whole body trembling in excitement. "I've never seen him like this." Jim whispered, sinking onto a nearby chair. Not with anyone. Walter crouched despite his aching knees, and the dog immediately placed his head on the old man's shoulder, a gesture so familiar it made Walter's breath catch. Martha and I taught him to hug like this, he explained, his voice thick with emotion. Called it his shoulder hold. Never seen another dog do it. Jim watched, his own eyes dampening. Duke, or Buddy, he sleeps in my bed every night. Follows me everywhere. I thought we had a special bond, but this... He gestured helplessly at the scene before him. Dogs can love more than one person, Walter said gently. Doesn't make what you have with him any less real. For the next hour, Walter demonstrated commands that Buddy had known, unique phrases he and Martha had created that wouldn't be standard training. The dog responded to each one, performing tricks Jim had never seen him do before. Buddy, find Martha, Walter said softly at one point. The German shepherd's ears perked up. Then he began searching the cabin, sniffing in corners and under furniture before returning to Walter with a confused whine. He's looking for my wife, Walter explained. We taught him to find her when her arthritis was bad and she needed help. Jim ran a hand through his beard, visibly shaken. This is really your dog, isn't it? Yes, Walter answered simply. Though he's been yours too, these past years. That evening, as Walter prepared to leave, Jim made an unexpected offer. Why don't you come by again tomorrow? And maybe we could work something out. Shared custody or something. Until we sort this all out legally. Hope bloomed in Walter's chest. I'd appreciate that more than you know. As he drove home in the gathering dusk, Walter's phone rang. It was Lily. Grandpa, I'm at your house. Where are you? Just heading back from Jim Pearson's place. I spent time with Buddy today. Was it him? Lily asked, her skepticism now tempered with curiosity. Without a doubt, Walter replied firmly. But there's something else you should know. I'm not trying to take him away from Jim completely. That young man loves him too, and Buddy's had enough upheaval. That's really thoughtful, Grandpa. Lily sounded surprised. Listen, I found something while I was waiting for you. I started clearing those old garden beds like you asked, and I dug up a collar. It was buried pretty deep. Walter nearly swerved off the road. A collar? What color? Red leather, really deteriorated. But Grandpa, there's something inside it. Looks like a microchip casing, though it's pretty damaged. If it's Buddy's collar, then we might be able to prove it once and for all, Walter finished, pressing the gas pedal a little harder. For the first time in 5 years, the road ahead seemed bright with possibility. The next morning, Walter woke before dawn, his old bedroom ceiling swimming into focus as excitement pushed sleep away. Across the room, on his dresser, lay Buddy's mud-encrusted collar, a testament to years buried in Martha's garden. Lily had cleaned it as best she could, revealing faded stitching that spelled Buddy and the damaged microchip casing. You're sure this can help? Walter asked, cradling a chipped mug of coffee as Lily photographed the collar from various angles. It's our best shot, she replied, her Nashville tech company credentials finally being put to use for her grandfather's cause. The microchip itself looks pretty corroded, but the casing's intact. I've got a friend at the university vet program who says their lab might be able to recover the data. Walter nodded, watching her slender fingers work with careful precision. At 26, Lily had Martha's determined chin and his own stubbornness, a combination that had taken her far from Oak Ridge but never disconnected her from her roots. Your dad called last night, Walter mentioned casually. Lily's hands stilled. And thinks I'm on a fool's errand. Says even if it is Buddy, the legal owner is whoever has the most recent paperwork. Lily snorted. Dad's always been about the rules. Never understood that some things matter more. She placed the collar carefully in a plastic container. Besides, he's wrong. Stolen property doesn't become legal just because it changes hands a few times. If we can prove Buddy was stolen, that's a mighty big if, Walter interrupted, though hope colored his voice. 5 years is a long time for evidence. The conversation paused as Walter's phone rang, Jim Pearson's number flashing on the screen. Walter answered with trepidation, fearing the young man had reconsidered their arrangement. Walter, you need to come to town. Jim's voice sounded strained. Something wrong with Buddy? No, he's fine. But, Jim lowered his voice. People are talking. Word's spreading about your claim. Some folks are taking sides. By 10 o'clock, Walter and Lily arrived at the Oak Ridge Diner to find it unusually crowded for a Sunday morning. Conversations hushed momentarily as they entered, then resumed with heightened intensity. Doreen bustled over, coffee pot in hand. "Quite the stir you've caused, Walt," she said, filling 2 mugs without being asked. "Elaine Winters has been in here telling everyone how she always suspected Buddy was stolen. And Tom Guthrie from the hardware store says he remembers you posting those missing dog flyers all over county." Walter scanned the room, noting the mix of curious and supportive glances from townspeople he'd known for decades. "What exactly is Jim worried about?" Lily whispered. Her question was answered when the diner door swung open and Sheriff Daniels stepped in, his weathered face serious beneath his department cap. The conversations quieted instantly. "Walter," he nodded, approaching their table. "Heard we've got ourselves a situation." "Ray," Walter acknowledged, having known the sheriff since they were boys together. "Not sure I'd call it a situation." "Well, when half the town starts calling the station about a stolen dog case from 5 years back, and my deputies can't get their breakfast without being lobbied to take sides, I'd say that's a situation." Despite his serious tone, there was a glint of amusement in Ray's eyes. "We found Buddy's collar," Walter said, nodding toward the container Lily held, with the microchip still inside. Sheriff Daniels raised his eyebrows. "That could change things. Mind if I join you?" Over the next half hour, the diner became an impromptu town meeting as Walter recounted the story of Buddy's disappearance, Jim's purchase of the dog, and their current tentative arrangement. Sheriff Daniels listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "So this farmer, Hank Miller, bought the dog from a trucker passing through," the sheriff repeated thoughtfully. "Any chance of identifying this trucker?" "That's the problem," Lily interjected. "The trail goes cold. It's been too long." An unexpected voice joined the conversation from 2 tables over. "Maybe not," said Margaret Weber, the town's retired veterinarian. The silver-haired woman approached slowly, leaning on her cane. "5 years ago, I treated a German Shepherd with a distinctive white star marking. Man brought him in for a health certificate. Said he needed it to transport the dog across state lines." Walter's heart hammered against his ribs. "When exactly?" 3 days after you reported Buddy missing," Margaret replied, her eyes troubled. "I remember thinking the dog seemed anxious, kept looking toward the door like he was waiting for someone. But the man had paperwork, forged, I now suspect, and I had no legal grounds to hold the animal." The diner had gone completely silent. "Why didn't you say something then?" Sheriff Daniels asked, though his tone remained respectful of the esteemed retired vet. Margaret's face flushed with shame. "I've asked myself that 1,000 times. I had suspicions, but no proof. By the time I heard about Walter's missing dog, the man was long gone." She turned to Walter, genuine regret in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Walter, but I did take blood samples that day, standard procedure, and I never discard records. If you have that microchip, we might be able to match them," Lily finished, excitement coloring her voice. As the implications sank in, the diner door swung open again. Jim Pearson stood there, the German Shepherd at his side. The dog's reaction was immediate, straining toward Walter with such force that Jim had to brace himself. "I think," Jim said quietly into the hushed room, "that we all need to accept what's right in front of us." By late April, 3 months into what the townspeople now called the Buddy affair, Walter sat beneath the oak tree outside Dr. Margaret Weber's home clinic, waiting. Inside, the retired veterinarian was comparing blood samples from her archived records with freshly drawn samples from the dog, who now divided his time between Walter's farm and Jim's riverside cabin. The arrangement had evolved organically. 3 days with Walter, 3 with Jim, with Sunday as their shared day at the farmer's market. The dog, whom they now called Buddy when with Walter and Duke with Jim, seemed to adapt to the situation better than either man had expected, though his enthusiasm when reuniting with Walter never dimmed. Lily emerged from the clinic, her expression unreadable. Walter's heart clenched as he struggled to stand. "What did she say?" he asked, voice hoarse with anticipation. "The blood types match," Lily said slowly, "but that's not conclusive proof. Labs in Nashville are still working on the microchip data. It's badly corroded." Walter nodded, disappointment warring with his natural patience. "We've waited 5 years. Guess we can wait a bit longer." They walked toward Walter's truck in comfortable silence, the spring air fragrant with dogwood blossoms. Oak Ridge looked especially picturesque today, its main street lined with flags for the upcoming Memorial Day celebrations. "Grandpa," Lily said suddenly, "have you considered what happens if we can prove Buddy was stolen? Jim's innocent in all this. He bought Duke in good faith." Walter sighed, leaning against the truck's faded blue fender. "Been thinking about that plenty. Can't punish the boy for someone else's crime. But knowing for sure it's Buddy, having it official, that would mean something." Before Lily could respond, Walter's phone rang. Dr. Weber's name flashed on the screen. "Walter, come back," the veterinarian said without preamble. "There's something you need to see." They returned to find Margaret at her computer, glasses perched on her nose, surrounded by old file folders. Jim had arrived as well, summoned by the same urgent call. "I kept thinking about that man from 5 years ago," she explained, fingers flying over her keyboard. "Something was familiar about him, but I couldn't place it. So I went through my digital records from that period." She swiveled her monitor toward them. On screen was a grainy security camera image showing a bearded man in his 40s holding a leash attached to a German Shepherd. "My reception area camera," Margaret explained. "Look at his truck through the window." Jim leaned closer. "White van with some kind of logo." Walter squinted, his heart racing. "Harvey's Mobile Dog Grooming," he read slowly. "I remember them. They went out of business years ago." "They sure did," Margaret said grimly. "Right after several counties reported purebred dogs going missing. Nothing was ever proven, but Sheriff Daniels, who had joined them minutes earlier, pulled out his notepad. "Harvey Malone. I remember that case. He skipped town before we could build anything solid against him." "Could you identify him after all this time?" Lily asked Walter. Walter stared at the image, memories flooding back. "That's the man who came to the farm a week before Buddy disappeared. Said he was offering free grooming as a promotion. Martha told him we weren't interested. He was scouting," Sheriff Daniels muttered, "targeting valuable purebreds." Jim had gone pale, the implications sinking in. "So Duke really is Buddy," Walter finished. "My buddy." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "What happens now?" Jim finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, a commotion erupted outside, barking, followed by the screech of tires. They rushed to the window in time to see a dark sedan speeding away. In the clinic's front yard, the German Shepherd was barking frantically after the car, strain at the end of his leash, which was tied to a post. "What in blazes?" Walter hurried outside, the others close behind. A piece of paper had been secured beneath the dog's collar, a crudely scrawled note. "Back off, or else. Some things better left buried." Sheriff Daniels carefully removed the note using a handkerchief. "Looks like someone doesn't want this story coming to light." "Could it be Harvey Malone?" Lily asked. "Or someone connected to him?" The sheriff replied. "That stolen dog ring wasn't just one man." Later that evening, as Walter sat on his porch with Buddy at his feet, it was his 3-day turn with the dog. Jim's truck came bouncing up the gravel driveway, unusual for their alternating schedule. Jim emerged looking troubled, clutching a manila envelope. "Got this in my mailbox," he explained, handing it to Walter. "No return address." Inside was a single photograph, Jim's pottery shop with a red X drawn across it, along with the words, "Last warning." "They're threatening your livelihood," Walter realized aloud, anger rising in his chest. Jim sank onto the porch steps, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't sign up for this, Walter. I just wanted a dog, you know? A companion." Walter nodded slowly, studying the young man's face. At 34, Jim had the weathered look of someone who'd seen his share of hardship. The pottery shop represented years of struggle and sacrifice. "What are you thinking?" Walter asked quietly. Jim looked up, resolve hardening his features. "I'm thinking it might be best if Duke, Buddy, stays with you for a while. And maybe I should take that artist residency in Asheville I was offered, just until things cool down." Walter felt a complex mixture of emotions: concern for Jim's safety, relief at the prospect of having Buddy full-time, and sadness for the young man's predicament. "You shouldn't have to leave your home because of criminals," Walter protested. "It's just temporary," Jim assured him, though his expression suggested otherwise. "Besides, I've been wanting to expand my pottery techniques. This is a good opportunity." As darkness fell over the farm, Walter watched Jim's taillights disappear down the long driveway. Buddy pressed anxiously against his leg. Something about Jim's departure felt ominously final. May blurred into June, and Walter settled into a routine with Buddy. Their mornings began with slow walks around the farm's perimeter, the dog always alert for rabbits that might dart across their path. Afternoons found them on the porch swing, Walter reading aloud from whatever book Lily had brought on her last visit, while Buddy dozed at his feet. But beneath this tranquil surface, tensions simmered. Jim had indeed taken the artist residency in Asheville. His pottery shop shuttered with a handwritten sign, temporarily closed for creative sabbatical. Sheriff Daniels made inquiries about Harvey Malone and his former operation, but leads were scarce after so many years. The microchip recovery efforts continued to hit roadblocks, with each specialist claiming the damage was too extensive before referring them to someone with more advanced equipment. Walter began to wonder if they would ever have definitive proof. Then came the Tuesday when everything changed. Walter was gathering eggs from the chicken coop when his chest tightened like a vice. Pain radiated down his left arm as he dropped to his knees, gasping for breath. Buddy's frantic barking seemed to come from miles away despite the dog nudging at his face, trying to keep him conscious. "Good boy," Walter whispered as darkness closed in around his vision. "Find help." He awoke to the sterile white ceiling of Oak Ridge Regional Hospital's cardiac unit, the steady beep of monitors replacing the familiar sounds of his farm. A slight weight on the bed made him glance down to find Lily asleep in a chair, her head resting near his hand. "Welcome back," came Dr. Sanders' voice from the doorway. The physician Walter had known since she was a gangly teenager entering medical school approached the bed, checking his vitals. "You gave everyone quite a scare." "How?" Walter's voice emerged as a croak. "Your dog," Dr. Sanders explained, adjusting his foredrip, "somehow got to your nearest neighbor's place, the Johnsons. Barked and carried on until Mrs. Johnson followed him back to your farm. Found you in time for the ambulance to get there." Walter's eyes burned with tears. "Buddy saved me." "He certainly did. Mrs. Johnson said he led her straight to you, then jumped in the ambulance and wouldn't leave your side until they physically removed him at the hospital doors." Lily stirred, blinking awake. When she saw Walter conscious, she burst into tears. "Grandpa, thank God." She clutched his hand. "Dad's flying in tomorrow. Even he's convinced about Buddy now. Says no ordinary dog would know to get help like that." Walter managed a weak smile. "Where is Buddy now?" "With Mrs. Johnson. I'll bring him to visit as soon as you're stable." Lily wiped her eyes. "The doctors say you had a significant heart attack. They've scheduled you for bypass surgery." The news should have frightened him, but Walter felt surprisingly calm. "Did Jim call back?" Lily's expression clouded. "That's complicated. When I called to tell him about your heart attack, his number was disconnected. I reached out to the Asheville Arts Center where he was supposed to be, but they said he never showed up for the residency." Walter's monitor beeped faster as his pulse quickened. "Something's wrong. Jim wouldn't just disappear, especially not after hearing I was in the hospital." Dr. Sanders intervened, adjusting his medication. "Let's focus on getting you well first, Walter. You've got surgery in the morning." The next 3 days passed in a blur of doctors, medications, and recovery. Walter's surgery went smoothly, but his thoughts remained troubled by Jim's disappearance. His son David arrived from Chicago, gruff but concerned, finally acknowledging that the dog who had saved his father's life must indeed be Buddy. Why would someone threaten a Potter over a dog case this old? David wondered aloud, pacing the hospital room. "It doesn't make sense. Unless the dog theft ring was bigger than we thought," Lily suggested, "or connected to something else illegal." On Walter's 4th day in the hospital, Dr. Sanders made an unexpected exception to the no pets policy, allowing Mrs. Johnson to bring Buddy for a brief visit. The staff watched in amazement as the German Shepherd entered the cardiac wing with almost supernatural calmness, walking directly to Walter's room as if he'd memorized the hospital layout. "He's been pining for you," Mrs. Johnson explained as Buddy gently rested his head on the edge of Walter's bed. "Sits by the window all day, watching the driveway." Walter stroked the dog's ears, his heart full. "You saved my life, old friend." As if understanding, Buddy licked Walter's hand once, then settled into a perfect sit position beside the bed. "We've got 10 minutes, Dr. Sanders warned, though her stern expression had softened at the scene. In those 10 minutes, something remarkable happened. Through the open door came Margaret Weber, moving quickly despite her cane, excitement evident in her usually composed features. "Walter, Thank heavens you're awake. I've been trying to get through to Lily, but with everything happening. She paused, catching her breath. The university lab called. They've partially recovered the microchip data. The room went still. And Walter prompted, his heart monitor betraying his anticipation. Margaret smiled triumphantly. It's a match to my records. The microchip was registered to Martha Abernathy in 2013, with you as the secondary contact. This is Buddy, without a doubt. David, who had remained skeptical despite recent events, sat down heavily. So he really was stolen. Yes, Margaret confirmed. And there's more. I've been digitizing my old records, and I found something odd. That man, Harvey Malone, brought in 3 other dogs within a month of Buddy. All purebreds. All with health certificates for transport. A theft ring, Lily whispered. But that's not all, Margaret continued. In each case, he listed the same destination, Riverdale Kennels in Johnson City. Walter frowned. Never heard of it. Because it's not a real business, Margaret explained. I checked. The address exists, but it's a storage facility. Sheriff Daniels is looking into it now. As the implications sank in, Buddy suddenly stood alert, his ears forward. A second later, Sheriff Daniels appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Walter, we need to talk about Jim Pearson, he said without preamble. His cabin was broken into last night. Place was torn apart like someone was looking for something. Walter struggled to sit up straighter. Any sign of Jim? The sheriff shook his head. None, but we found this tacked to his front door. He held up a photograph of Walter's farm with the same red X as before, and words that chilled the room. You're next, old man. The farmhouse felt different when Walter returned home after 2 weeks of hospitalization and rehabilitation. David had installed security cameras before returning to Chicago, their small red lights blinking from various corners like mechanical fireflies. Lily had extended her stay indefinitely, converting the old sewing room into a makeshift office where she could work remotely. And Sheriff Daniels had deputies driving by regularly, their patrol cars crunching down the gravel driveway at unpredictable intervals. Walter hated all of it. This isn't living, he complained to Buddy as they sat on the porch one evening in late July. The German shepherd's head rested on his knee, those soulful eyes seeming to understand Walter's frustration. Feels like we're under house arrest for a crime we didn't commit. Inside, Lily was on her 3rd conference call of the day, her voice drifting through the screen door as she discussed marketing strategies with colleagues who had no idea she was speaking from a farmhouse under threat. Walter stroked Buddy's graying muzzle, considering what they knew. Jim Pearson had vanished without a trace. The mysterious storage facility in Johnson City had yielded nothing but empty units when Sheriff Daniels investigated. And Walter's recovery was progressing more slowly than he'd hoped, the surgery having taken more out of him than he cared to admit. Mr. Abernathy? A deputy's voice called from the driveway as a patrol car pulled up. Just checking in. Everything quiet today? Walter forced a polite smile. Quiet as a church on Monday, Deputy Reeves. Not even a squirrel stirring. The young officer nodded, making a note on his clipboard. Sheriff wanted me to tell you they've put out an interstate alert for Jim Pearson. Still no hits, but we're watching. After the deputy left, Walter turned to Buddy with determination. This isn't right. Jim's in trouble because of us, and we're sitting here doing nothing. The dog's ears perked up at Walter's change in tone. Lily, Walter called, pushing himself up from the rocker with effort. Need to talk to you. Inside, his granddaughter was just ending her call. What's up, Grandpa? Need your medication? No, Walter said firmly. I need to sell the farm. Lily's jaw dropped. What? Why? Because of the threats? The security system is working fine, and the deputies. This isn't about the threats, Walter interrupted, easing himself into a kitchen chair. It's about Jim. Whoever has him, and I'm convinced someone does, took him because of his connection to Buddy and to me. They're trying to bury this case, make it go away. I don't understand how selling the farm helps that situation, Lily replied cautiously. Walter leaned forward. Because the farm keeps me here, keeps me visible and predictable. I need to be where they don't expect me, in the city, where Jim might be. Nashville? Lily asked, incredulous. You want to move to Nashville? Grandpa, you've lived on this land your entire life. Not Nashville. Walter shook his head. Johnson City. That storage facility may have been empty, but it's still our only lead. Harvey Malone listed it as a destination for a reason. Lily stared at her grandfather, recognizing the stubborn set of his jaw, the same expression he wore when teaching her to ride a bicycle without training wheels, or when insisting she apply for that college scholarship everyone said was a long shot. "This is crazy," she finally said. "You're recovering from heart surgery. You can't just sell your family home and move to Johnson City on a hunch." "Watch me," Walter replied, a spark in his eyes that had been missing for weeks. "Besides, it's not just a hunch. It's the right thing to do. Jim Pearson is missing because he did the decent thing. He gave Buddy back to me when he realized the truth, despite loving that dog something fierce. I owe him." Lily recognized the futility of arguing further. "Let me make some calls," she sighed. "My friend Rachel works in real estate. Maybe she knows someone in Johnson City who could help us find a rental first, before you go selling the family farm." Walter nodded, satisfied. Fair compromise. For now. By mid-August, Walter had listed the farm with Rachel's agency. The property's value had increased significantly since he'd inherited it 50 years earlier, and several developers expressed immediate interest. Within days, he had a cash offer well above asking price. "They'll bulldoze everything," Lily warned as they reviewed the paperwork. "Turn it into one of those vinyl-sided subdivisions with names like Oak Meadow Estates, even though they cut down all the oaks to build it." Walter signed his name with a steady hand. "Land changes. Always has. Your grandmother understood that better than anyone." Meanwhile, their preparation for the move to Johnson City proceeded rapidly. Lily found them a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a senior-friendly building that accepted large dogs. Walter sorted through decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep, what to sell, and what to pass on to family members. The day before their scheduled move, Sheriff Daniels arrived with unexpected news. "Got something you need to see," he said, placing a file folder on Walter's kitchen table. Johnson City PD found Jim Pearson's truck abandoned behind a motel on the outskirts of town. Been there at least a month based on the parking violations piled up on the windshield. Walter opened the folder to find photographs of Jim's familiar blue pickup, a layer of dust coating its surface. "Any sign of Jim?" he asked, dread pooling in his stomach. "None," the sheriff replied grimly. "But they found this in the glove compartment." He slid across a plastic evidence bag containing a small notebook. Through the clear plastic, Walter could see pages filled with Jim's neat handwriting, lists of names and dates. "What is it?" Lily asked, peering over her grandfather's shoulder. "Looks like Jim was conducting his own investigation," Sheriff Daniels explained. "Names of dogs, breeds, dates they went missing. And this." He pointed to a page with an address circled repeatedly, the pen having nearly torn through the paper. "Regional Dog Show Grounds. Happens every year in Johnson City." Walter's pulse quickened. "When's the next one?" The sheriff met his gaze steadily. "Started yesterday. Runs through Sunday. That's where they'll be," Walter said with sudden certainty. "The people behind all this. Maybe even Jim." "Now hold on," Sheriff Daniels cautioned. "That's quite a leap, Walter. Could be coincidence. 5 years ago, purebred dogs start disappearing all across the region," Walter countered. "Including Buddy. Harvey Malone creates false papers and sells them through a network. Jim starts asking questions about one of those dogs and suddenly vanishes. His own investigation leads to this dog show. That's not coincidence, Ray. That's connection." The sheriff sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I've already alerted Johnson City PD. They'll have officers at the show. But they don't know what to look for," Walter insisted. "They don't know about Buddy, or the star marking, or any of it. We need to be there." "Absolutely not," Lily interjected. "It's too dangerous." Walter fixed her with a look that brooked no argument. "We're already moving there tomorrow. And I'm just an old man with his dog attending a show. Who's going to notice me?" As Lily and the sheriff continued to protest, Buddy approached Walter, placing his paw on the old man's knee. A gesture they all recognized as his way of indicating something important. "See," Walter said softly. "Even Buddy agrees. It's time we stopped hiding and started hunting." The Johnson City Annual Kennel Club show transformed the regional fairgrounds into a bustling hub of canine enthusiasm. Hundreds of purebred dogs and their owners filled the sprawling exhibition halls, with grooming stations, judging rings, and vendor booths creating a labyrinth of activity. Walter leaned heavily on his walking stick as he and Buddy navigated the entrance, Lily close beside them. They had agreed on a compromise. Walter could attend, but only with Lily and Buddy as his constant companions, and only after Sheriff Daniels coordinated with local police to maintain an inconspicuous presence throughout the venue. "Remember the plan," Lily murmured as they passed through the main gate, having paid for general admission tickets. "We're just spectators. If you see anything suspicious, we alert the officers first. No heroics." Walter nodded absently, his attention already focused on scanning the crowds. Buddy, wearing a simple leather collar and leash rather than his usual harness, drew curious glances from passing show handlers. "Fine-looking shepherd," commented an elderly woman with a perfectly coiffed Pomeranian in her arms. "Showing him in the veterans class?" "Just visiting," Walter replied with a disarming smile. Interested in the breed rings. As they moved deeper into the show, Walter felt a growing sense that they were being watched. Twice he caught glimpses of men in dark jackets quickly looking away when he turned in their direction. Whether they were plainclothes officers or something more sinister remained unclear. "German Shepherd judging is in Ring 3 at 11, Lily noted, consulting the program. "That's in 30 minutes. If Harvey Malone or his associates are involved in dog shows, that would be the logical place to start looking." They found seats on the aluminum bleachers surrounding Ring 3, positioning themselves with a clear view of both the ring and the preparation area, where handlers made final adjustments to their dogs before competing. Buddy sat alert at Walter's feet, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd as if he too were searching for something or someone. "This was a mistake," Lily whispered after 20 minutes of watching. "We're looking for a needle in a haystack. These people are legitimate breeders and handlers. No sign of anything suspicious." Walter shook his head. "Give it time. Something feels right about this place." As the German Shepherd competitors began assembling for their class, Buddy suddenly stiffened. A low growl rumbled in his chest as his eyes fixed on a point across the ring. "What is it, boy?" Walter followed the dog's gaze to a middle-aged man in an exhibitor's jacket leading a German Shepherd toward the ring entrance. Nothing about the man seemed immediately suspicious. Average height, neatly trimmed beard, professional demeanor as he prepared his dog for judging. Then the man turned slightly, and Walter caught a clear view of his face. "That's him," he breathed, gripping Lily's arm. "The man from Dr. Weber's security footage. Harvey Malone." Lily squinted. "Are you sure? It's been 5 years, and you only saw a grainy image." "I'm positive," Walter insisted. "And look at that dog. Same build as Buddy, same coloring. Just younger and without the star marking." As if sensing their scrutiny, the man glanced in their direction. For a fraction of a second, his eyes locked with Walter's. Recognition flashed across his features, followed immediately by alarm. He quickly handed his dog's leash to another handler and began moving briskly toward a side exit. "He recognized me," Walter said, struggling to his feet. "He's running." "Wait," Lily hissed, but Walter was already moving, Buddy at his side. She hurried after them, frantically texting their location to the plainclothes officer they'd met earlier. Walter followed the man through the service corridors behind the exhibition hall, his recent surgery forgotten as adrenaline propelled him forward. Buddy strained at his leash, leading more than following, as if he recognized a scent beyond Walter's human perception. The corridors opened into a loading dock area where several vans and trucks were parked. Harvey Malone was sprinting toward a white van, newer, but unmistakably similar to the one from years earlier, though with different lettering on the side. "Champion Transport, Specialty Pet Relocation." "Stop," Walter called, his voice stronger than it had been in years. "Harvey Malone." The man froze, then slowly turned. His hand moved toward his jacket pocket. "I wouldn't," came a stern voice from behind a nearby truck. A plainclothes officer emerged, badge held high, service weapon drawn. "Police. Hands where I can see them." For a moment, it seemed Malone might comply. Then he lunged for the van door. What happened next occurred so quickly that Walter would later struggle to recall the sequence. Buddy somehow slipped his leash, launching himself at Malone with a ferocity Walter had never witnessed in the gentle dog. Malone went down hard, crying out as Buddy pinned him, teeth bared but not biting, restraining rather than attacking. "Call him off," Malone shouted, terror evident in his voice. "For God's sake, Buddy, hold," Walter commanded, a command he and Martha had taught the dog years ago for playful wrestling matches with their grandchildren. To his amazement, Buddy maintained his position, growling but controlled, as officers converged from multiple directions. As Malone was handcuffed and lifted to his feet, the van's rear doors suddenly burst open. A young man stumbled out, his hands bound with zip ties, his face bruised but recognizable. "Jim!" Walter exclaimed, moving forward as officers rushed to assist. Jim Pearson looked up, disbelief washing over his battered face. "Walter? What are you doing here?" Before Walter could answer, Buddy abandoned his guard position over Malone and raced to Jim, whining and circling anxiously as an officer cut the zip ties. "He was keeping me in there," Jim explained as medics arrived to examine him. "Caught me snooping around his operation back in June. Been moving me between locations ever since, trying to figure out how much I knew and who I told." In the chaotic hour that followed, the full story emerged. Harvey Malone's Champion Transport business was a sophisticated front for a dog theft operation that spanned 5 states. Working with a network of spotters who identified valuable purebreds, Malone would steal the animals, create false papers, and sell them through a black market network to unscrupulous breeders or through intermediaries to unsuspecting buyers like Jim. "He panicked when he saw me at the farmer's market with Duke. With Buddy," Jim explained as they sat in a makeshift interview room at the fairground security office. "Realized his operation might be exposed if someone traced the dog back to him." Walter listened, Buddy's head resting on his knee. "But why keep you alive all this time? Why not just—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Jim's expression darkened. "He needed information. Wanted to know if I'd documented the purchase chain. Then he planned to use me to lure you out." He looked at Walter with genuine amazement. "Never expected you'd come looking for me. Couldn't very well abandon the man who gave me back my dog. Now could I?" Walter replied gruffly, emotion thickening his voice. A detective entered with news that searchers had found 5 more dogs in a hidden compartment in Malone's van, all reported stolen from various locations, all destined for sale to an overseas buyer. "Mr. Pearson's documentation was the break we needed," the detective explained. "Those notebooks in his truck, he'd been tracking suspected stolen dogs for months after he realized the truth about Duke. Buddy. We've got names, dates, locations. This operation is finished." As evening fell over Johnson City, Walter sat in the animal control facility where the recovered dogs were being processed and examined. Beside him, Jim nursed a cup of coffee, bruises stark against his pale skin but relief evident in his eyes. Buddy lay between them, occasionally shifting to press against one man, then the other, as if unwilling to choose. "So what happens now?" Jim asked quietly. "With Buddy, I mean." Walter studied the younger man's face, seeing in it both the trauma of recent events and a fundamental decency that had led him to risk everything to do the right thing. "I've been thinking about that," Walter replied. "Bought an apartment in Johnson City. 2 bedrooms. Could use someone to help with the rent." Understanding dawned in Jim's eyes. "You saying what I think you're saying?" Walter nodded. "Farm sold. Too big for me anyway after the surgery. Figure Buddy deserves to have both his people around. If you're interested." Jim's smile was answer enough. Buddy, sensing the shift in mood, thumped his tail against the floor and let out a contented sigh that seemed to say some decisions make themselves. 1 year later, the modest apartment on Magnolia Street had transformed into something neither Walter nor Jim could have imagined that fateful day at the farmer's market. The 2nd bedroom still belonged to Jim, but he used it primarily as a studio where he created pottery pieces that had gained unexpected recognition in Johnson City's thriving art scene. The living room had become Buddy's domain, with his bed positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon sun through the bay window. Walter sat at the kitchen table, writing careful replies to the latest batch of letters, correspondence from across the country that arrived daily since their story had been featured in a national magazine. Some were from people who had lost pets and never found closure. Others came from law enforcement agencies seeking guidance on investigating animal theft rings. Each envelope contained a story of loss or hope, and Walter answered them all. "Mail's here," Jim announced, entering with a stack of envelopes and a small package, including something from Lily. Walter smiled as Jim placed the package before him. Since returning to Nashville, Lily called weekly and visited monthly, but packages were special occasions. "Let's see what my granddaughters sent this time," Walter murmured, carefully opening the brown paper wrapping. Inside was a framed photograph and a note. The picture showed Walter, Jim, and Buddy at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for this Second Chance Sanctuary, the rescue organization they had helped establish with proceeds from Walter's farm sale and donations that poured in after their story went public. The sanctuary specialized in reuniting stolen pets with their original owners and rehabilitating animals recovered from trafficking operations. Lily's note was brief, but made Walter's eyes mist over. Thought you should have this for your wall of fame. Martha would be so proud of what you've created. Love you, Grandpa. Buddy, sensing the emotional moment, patted over to rest his graying muzzle on Walter's knee. Can you believe it's been a year? Jim asked, leaning against the counter. At 35, he looked younger than when they'd first met, the haunted expression replaced by quiet confidence. The pottery studio he'd opened downtown, star-marking ceramics, had quickly become a local favorite. Sometimes feels like yesterday, Walter replied, scratching behind Buddy's ears. Other times feels like a lifetime ago. Their peaceful morning was interrupted by a knock at the door. Jim opened it to reveal Sheriff Daniels, now retired himself and serving as a volunteer consultant for the sanctuary. Got a live one, Ray announced without preamble, stepping inside. 12-year-old beagle, missing 8 years, just got picked up by animal control in Memphis. Microchip traced it back to a family in Knoxville who'd given up hope. Walter was already reaching for his coat. These recovery missions had become the heartbeat of his new life. Each reunion an echo of his own journey with Buddy. Details? He asked, instinctively checking his pocket for the business cards they carried. Senior pet recovery specialists emblazoned beneath their names. Families driving down from Knoxville. Dogs being transported here since we've got the facilities for the reunion. Should arrive around noon. Jim grabbed the reunion kit they kept ready. A bag containing calming treats, a special blanket, and recording equipment to document the moment for their growing archive of successful cases. As they prepared to leave, Walter paused to look at Buddy, now napping peacefully in a sunbeam. At 13, the German Shepherd moved more slowly, his muzzle almost completely white, but his eyes remained bright and alert. Think he'll be okay alone for a few hours? Jim asked, following Walter's gaze. Walter nodded. He knows we're coming back. Always does. The sanctuary occupied a renovated farmhouse on the outskirts of Johnson City, surrounded by 5 acres of fenced land where rescued animals could exercise safely. As they pulled into the gravel parking lot, Walter saw Dr. Margaret Weber's car already there. The retired veterinarian had joined their cause enthusiastically, offering her expertise pro bono and training a team of vet students in the specific needs of traumatized and recovered animals. Inside, the atmosphere hummed with purposeful activity. Volunteers moved between kennels and play areas, working with dogs at various stages of rehabilitation. A wall of photographs, the reunion wall, displayed before and after images of successfully reunited pets and owners. 38 successes in their first year alone. Walter, Jim, Margaret called from her office. Come see this. She showed them security camera footage from Memphis Animal Control, where the beagle had been brought in as a stray. The dog's condition was reasonably good considering its age and circumstances, suggesting it had been kept as a pet rather than used for breeding. Preliminary skin shows the microchip is intact. No question about identity, Margaret explained. Original family had children who were preschoolers when the dog vanished. They're teenagers now. Walter nodded, emotion tightening his throat as it always did before these reunions. Let's get everything ready. First impressions matter, for both sides. By noon, the sanctuary's special reunion room was prepared. Soft music played through hidden speakers. Comfortable seating formed a semicircle around a central area with non-slip flooring. Cameras were positioned discreetly to capture the moment without intruding. The Knoxville family arrived first, parents in their 40s and 2 teenagers who fidgeted nervously in the waiting area. What if he doesn't remember us? The 15-year-old girl asked Walter, voicing the fear common to all these reunions. Walter placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I'm going to tell you something I've learned from experience. The bond between a dog and their family creates memories that time can't erase. Trust that. When the transport arrived with the beagle, Walter supervised the initial health check and preparation. The dog, originally named Charlie, appeared confused but not fearful, his tail wagging cautiously as Walter spoke to him in the soothing tones he'd perfected over dozens of similar cases. Ready to see your people, Charlie? Walter asked, attaching a special breakaway leash designed to give the dog freedom to approach or retreat as needed. The reunion unfolded exactly as Walter had come to expect, yet it moved him deeply as always. Charlie's initial confusion as he entered the room. The moment of stillness as sense from the past registered. The gradual acceleration of his tail. Then the transformation, from cautious elderly dog to jubilant family member as recognition dawned and Charlie rushed to his family, all dignity abandoned in the joy of rediscovery. Walter and Jim stepped back, giving the family their moment while Margaret discreetly wiped tears behind her clipboard. After proper medical follow-up instructions and paperwork were completed, they watched another successful reunion depart. The beagle curled contentedly in the teenage girl's lap, as though the 8-year separation had been merely a brief interruption. That evening, as autumn painted the Tennessee hills in fiery colors, Walter, Jim, and Buddy sat on their small balcony overlooking the city lights. A cool breeze carried the promise of winter, making Buddy press closer to Walter's chair. "Got a call from the magazine today," Jim mentioned, passing Walter a mug of tea. "They want to do a follow-up story. First anniversary of the sanctuary." Walter nodded thoughtfully. "Could bring in more donations. More attention to the cause." "That's what I figured." Jim hesitated. "They want to focus on us, though. The unlikely family angle. How a stolen dog brought together an elderly farmer and a young potter to create something that's changing lives across the country." Walter chuckled. "Sounds like one of those Hallmark movies Lily's always watching." "Except it's real," Jim replied simply. Buddy shifted, lifting his head to look between them before settling again with a contented sigh. In that moment, Walter felt a profound sense of rightness, a feeling that all the pain and struggle had led precisely where they needed to be. "You know," Walter said after a comfortable silence, "Martha always said everything happens for a reason, even the bad things." Never quite believed her until now. Jim nodded, understanding without need for elaboration. "To unlikely families," he said, raising his mug in a toast. "And second chances," Walter added, thinking of Buddy, of Jim, of himself. 3 lives interrupted and then rewoven into something stronger than before. Later, as Walter prepared for bed, he placed the newly framed photograph from Lily on his nightstand next to the one of Martha with puppy Buddy. As if completing a circle, he thought, or perhaps beginning a new one. Buddy followed his evening routine perfectly, circling 3 times before settling at the foot of Walter's bed, a ritual unchanged despite all else that had transformed around them. "We did good, old friend," Walter murmured as sleep began to claim him. "We did real good." Buddy's tail thumped once against the blanket in agreement, a gentle punctuation to a story that had found its way, against all odds, to exactly the right ending. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and if you've watched this far, comment, "I watched all the way through," and share your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears in the end screen. It's very emotional.